and welcome to Michael Pepper Tech. I do apologize, I'm a bit late. My camera decided it was going to die on me literally at the end of the stream, so we'll see how well this one works out, and hopefully it's works okay. I'm using my phone, and I understand there might be a little bit of a delay between voice and video there, and I apologize for that, but I do know that you know the conversation will go on. And kind of what sparked this conversation is the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case that's been going on. If you don't know what it's all about, there's a defamation lawsuit, and one of the things that was brought up was an expert testifying as far as um, the images that were a part of this case and the accuracy and such of that matter. And so, one of the things that I wanted to talk about with this and discuss the reason kind of initially behind why am I talking about this? Well, for one, it's technology. For two, it's crime, and that stuff is fascinating to me. The mental aspects of it. I was a criminal justice major and then a photography major, specifically photographic imaging, and the aspects behind this. And one of the things that was brought up was EXIF data, and there was kind of this argument of EXIF data being different than metadata, and this is very true when we think about the when we think about what the defining difference between this is. uh, Realistically, metadata is stored in EXIF data, and EXIF data is just one type of particular file to store that information, and the metadata has everything to do with from the shutter speed, ISO, aperture, what device, what camera, what lens or equivalent lens was being used. And so this is something that's interesting when it comes to tech because we don't get to really get in depth with this very often. That was one of the things that was mildly disappointing to me was, there was no real discussion as far as like what does this mean? What's included? And then when he tried to get into that, they cut him off. And I understand. And this is the problem when it comes to photography and forensics. Obviously, we have the capture of if it's a crime scene that's being captured by a forensic photographer, we have that. If we have something in this case where it was a photograph that one person took of herself and is admitting this as evidence, and then it's being argued that there is some sort of alteration. The problem is if you're only allowed to look at the metadata, then you need to have somebody who can interpret it, which is different than somebody saying the metadata has been altered and this is why. There's a difference between that and interpreting the images and looking at color and all the other aspects of it. So they needed to really bring in somebody to look at those aspects and to argue on that. But also, then you have the basis of considering consistency and fluidity between the capture and it being transferred from whoever took it all the way to the point it is at now. Um, and that you can look at the metadata and you can see, okay, was it altered? Was it submitted from a different device than it was captured on? And you can know that by looking at resolution of the image and being like, well, that was an iPhone 6, but the iPhone 6 had a higher resolution than that, so you can know that it's been, and you can look and see if it's been cropped. This is all stuff that's fascinating, and this is stuff that's being used in day-to-day life and stuff that's way more in depth. We see shows like CSI, NCIS, Criminal Minds, and we see all this stuff, and we don't really appreciate all that goes into it. And so when I think about forensics and technology, I think about how it speeds up things by allowing stuff to be captured, and you don't have to have a bunch of film. It can be captured digitally, and then it can be immediately sent to backup, be sent to the particular department, organization, FBI, CIA, local departments, um, LAPD, whatever department is doing the investigation, whatever department has captured that. And then of course, you have later on, it can be transferred to other organizations and other departments if the data has been determined to be much bigger and beyond the scope of the particular initial investigation. So we get into some of this stuff and we get into the idea of how technology has advanced things, but I want you all to kind of think about beyond this a little bit and how it has also complicated the way that these things work, because now not only do we have the initial evidence that's being brought in, but we could have somebody else that's like, "Oh, I was there and took this photo too and submitted it," and now you have to verify that. But the great thing is you don't have to have somebody be there in person. If they live halfway around the world and there's people involved in trials, there's people involved in criminal cases that maybe they were traveling, maybe they live somewhere else and they can't exactly afford. You can cut down on costs by having Zoom calls or FaceTime calls and bringing in experts that way. It's done all the time. And then we look at the aspect of I have my phone that I'm using as a camera right now. Yes, it's not exactly the perfect and ideal use case for this. I'm disappointed. I was really hoping that I could get my camera to work here. Why it's not wanting to cooperate with me. But, you know, we have all this stuff that's on us, and it also makes it so that police departments have to be reliable because other people are around, other people are taking photos, other people are recording, other people are there, and we have more that can come into play that kind of protects the initial capture as per se of that data. But we also have a huge database of information so that that information can be compared to existing images that were captured by other people, and we can use things as far as GPS coordinates to determine. We can look at time of day. We have information potentially to go back and be like, well, that couldn't have been taken on that day because in that location it actually rained, and you have a perfectly sunny image here, and this was taken outside. You can see the woods behind it. But then you get into data alteration, and you get into false imagery, and you get into like green screen and AI, and you get into um, the aspects of technology that makes forensics and it makes image studies way more difficult. And knowing whether that image was taken by a phone or taken by a full-on camera, which I'm hoping to get to work. I'm disappointed that it's acting up on me. I don't know why it's acting up on me, but it is. And you know, the complication of technology, but also the aspects that have made things easier, sometimes both coincide with each other and line up rather well. And so when we look at how far this stuff has come along, hi Sharkfin, hi Jason, hi Lewis. Um, we appreciate all this stuff, but then there comes a time and play where it's brought into there, and you have to have people that you trust their knowledge as far as being experts on the situation. And so to me, it makes it trivial because if you aren't an expert on it, you just like I said, you just got to believe what's being brought out. And the problem in I'm going to bring up an example of the case today was he mentioned all this stuff and he mentioned hashing, but then do the people that are looking at the information know what hashing is? Do they know um, how it pertains to alignment to determine if both of the images were identical, if they were taken at two different times? They could have been identical, but then altered in order to make it appear as though they're not. That information is in there. The interpretation, you just kind of have to look at what he said, and they're not really given much beyond that to determine, like, okay, this is why he means that. And so timing comes into play because you have a great breadth of data that's being brought into play because of this technology that exists now. And we look at crimes that are being committed because technology exists that can make it more difficult to track, because wherever a human is involved, perhaps in um, creating an operating system, creating software, creating privacy databases and things like, ways to protect your privacy, that also means that somebody can easily take advantage of that. And so you know, you have bank accounts that are being hacked. You have, T-Mobile got hacked. You have all this stuff that comes into play, and trying to chain link that through. Sometimes it's never solved, or it can take a very long time, or sometimes it's pretty quick because you have people who feel like they know how the technology works, but in the end, they really don't fully understand how the technology is being used and appreciate how that comes to play. Let me fix something real quick. There we go. Get a little closer here so I'm not like hogging the whole. So then we have the aspects of research. So we don't necessarily know what false information people may have from their history, gathering information about the aspects. So when somebody's brought in to be on a jury, how do you guarantee that there isn't some false narrative brought into play, because technology is being used in all these situations. It's being discussed in all these situations, and it's not really fair to, make the assumption. But then at the same time, like I said, in these cases, they're making assumptions that people know what that means. The people know what metadata is. The people, even in the brief introductory of, okay, what's metadata, there was some things that were left out, and that's troublesome to me. And so, as somebody who enjoys photography and enjoys kind of the analytical aspect of things, and obviously I talk a lot, and I'm wordy sometimes, but to me, when we think about how technology has advanced, the problem is, in the days of film, you could just take a piece of film and you could show, okay, it hasn't been altered. This is this is the capture right from the camera. It's been marked. We have the original image. It's been stored. It hasn't been sent to somebody else. Um, it's been kept. But then at the same time, things can be hidden, things can be forgotten about, things can be difficult to be shared because you can't just quickly transfer it. You can't have it where like somebody's like, "Oh, I was there too. I took this photo at the party," and sends it to the police, and the police go, "Okay, yep, they took it. It wasn't altered. Um, we can use this." These are all aspects that really come into play and come into mind when I think about this stuff. And then we get into, how can the everyday consumer take advantage of this? And that really becomes fascinating to me, because you can also download and install a EXIF app per se and look at the information. And why would you want to do this? Well, let's say you want to know where an image was taken, and you go in on an iPhone or an Android device and you go into Apple Photos or Google Photos, and you can swipe and you can see information underneath, and it will show you location. It can show you date, time down to the second. And maybe that's all you need because you want to remember, okay, where was this? And I want to go back there. I take photos all the time, knowing that I can recall where it was taken by looking at the information that was captured. We have GPS, in our phones. There's ways to also, if you're taking photos with a regular camera, you can set it so that your phone will capture location while you're out and about, and you sync up the time, and when you get home, you can sync that up to the images and use that as a way to align that. The ability for people to take virtual tours exists because of this. Uh, Google Maps, Apple Maps, the virtual tours through buildings exist because they have that information and they can link that up and they can compile that using software. So this is all stuff that we use on the daily that most of us, I don't think, realize that we use. We don't necessarily look at Google Maps or Google Photos and think, how was this originally used and how are we using this on a personal day-to-day use, as far as it's not just for criminal use, it's not just for civil lawsuits, it's not just for putting somebody away or lawsuits. It's used for us to be able to appreciate experiences. You could go and you could say, let's say you had a child in 2007, 2008 when the first iPhones came out, and you took photos, every day, all the time, constantly, or, maybe not every day, but consistently. And as they grew up, as they got older, you kept taking photos, and you wanted to go and you wanted to say, I want to take and put together one photo on the same day every year that I've captured from birth, 1 year old, 2 year old, 3 year old, 4 year old. And I wanted to go by week up to a certain age, and then by month, and then by year. You can go and you can search through this because that metadata, because that EXIF file, because of this stuff that exists. You can go through and search for images that are very specific. Now we have ways of attaching information beyond that, where software can understand and look at objects that are in an image, and it can attach that in a way beyond. And that's not attached to the EXIF file, but we have AI and software that can connect that can attach that can say all these images have a dog in them, and we're going to attach that to it. So when you do a search, and that's what's being done with some of this now, rather than the software looking for something in it. When an image is uploaded, this information is attached to it. So when you go to search for this stuff, if it's in public database, if it's in public use, you can find it. You want to put together some clips, you can search through all of your own stuff in similar manner to how these experts would search through and find information. You can I've seen people do this, they have a loved one who passes away and they want to put stuff together. You can go and search images of, Bobby with Johnny or whatever, and it can all come into play. And this is stuff that I really, really, really find fascinating, that a lot of us don't think about, that our technology uses, that's used for personal use and professional use. And I think most of us just think, oh, it's boring, or oh, it's analytical, or oh, it's scientific. but I want you to enjoy it. I want you to be fascinated by how this works and how it can be used in your personal life. And that's something that I feel like many of us don't necessarily think about with this and appreciate about this, experience that we have with taking an image and then recalling it later because none of us have the memory. Well, some of us might, but most of us probably don't have the memory when it comes to recalling the specific day or location that an image was taken. We have so much to remember as it is. And so to be able to recall that is something and appreciate it, but at the same time, something that we have to think about when we look at technology is, does it make us lazier? Does it make us so that we don't have to necessarily learn stuff because we can just look it up? If you ask me a question and I don't know, most of the time I can pull out my phone and do a Google search and look it up. Now, later, may I be able to recall that and memorize that and use that and appreciate it? Yes. But the same thing comes into play when you were to ask me, okay, where was that photo taken or what device? I have multitude of devices. The other great aspect of it is I will sometimes take a photo on, let's say, my iPhone and my S22 Ultra or my Pixel, or taking it with a camera, and they all are synced up to Apple Photos or Google Photos or Amazon Photos or maybe OneDrive or whatever service you use to sync stuff. For me to be able to know which device it was taken on, because quite often it either shows up in that information, or I can look and see, okay, that's this resolution by this resolution, which makes it a 12 megapixel image, which means it was most likely taken on this device. Oh, that's a 50 megapixel. It's got to be taken on this device. Oh, that was a 48 megapixel. It had to be taken on this. You can kind of narrow it down by looking at that. And it doesn't require you to like memorize or to look and be like, oh, I know that that was taken by this because I could take 3 photos with 3 separate devices and have them look so similar that I don't even know. So to be able to use this for comparative, for constructive criticism on things, also to be able to repeat an image. Let's say I wanted to mm, recapture an experience or make sure that all the photos are taken and the color matches, to be able to look at and be like, oh, I took this photo and I got it edited the way that I wanted. That information is stored there too. If it's saved, if you take an image into Photoshop and you store that and you save that and you have the PSD, there will be a sidecar file that's stored. And this is something that, like, okay, this can seem really nerdy, but if you save that, you can also take that and copy that and apply that same edit, that same stuff to multitude of images. If you go in and rename a bunch of files, I can see that you've done that. The software will show me, okay, it was changed on a certain date, whether you wanted me to know that or not. It's not difficult to do, and it's a great experience, and it's something that's advantageous to all of us. You sat there and you spent a couple hours working on an image and you took all these and then the same lighting, or inside in a studio, or close enough to similar lighting, and you got one down. You apply that same thing to the rest of them, and then you go and you edit it slightly because maybe the light got a little warmer, or got a little cooler, or, the sun came out or the clouds covered it, and this and that. This is information that you can tell by looking at that data. And so I know I might be the only one that finds it fascinating. I know that, I'm not going to necessarily get a ton of people that find this as fascinating as I do. But this is how far we've come from the days of film and people taking notes, and then you'd have to find their journals, and you'd have to find, okay, how do they tag their images? How do they organize their photos, their film? How do they store it? How do they transport it? Was it damaged? Um, some photographers may have created their own code, so they're the only ones to know, so that people can't steal and repeat the process. If, as an artist, that's something incredible. The other thing is you can attach your name and a copyright into this information. So when you send it to somebody, if they were to go repost it or they were to go share it with somebody, you could look at that and be like, that was a photo I took. And I know because it's in the information, it's in the file, it's stored there, it's burnt into it. Also, a permanent watermark. And if somebody tried to use their software that will go over and try to use AI and remove watermark and do certain things on, this is all stuff that we can use each and every day, whether you're a content creator, a photographer, an artist, just day-to-day person being like, "Oh, um, you know, what device did you take that with? I need a new phone." And you can be like, um, "Oh, what device did I take that with? That photo was taken, a few years back." Somebody comments on an Instagram, a tweet, a um any of your images, Facebook image, what was this taken with, or where was this taken, or what's that? The ability to put that into like an image search, the ability for the fact that you can take a picture of a flower and that information can be analyzed and come back to you and say, okay, you know, that's this type of flower, and here's the scientific name for it. Or that's poison ivy, stay away from it. That's poison oak, stay away from it. That's poison sumac, stay away from it. That's this and that. The ability for it to help us protect ourselves is incredible. And to be able to be like, "Oh, I took that photo." Even think about the aspect of somebody tries to say, you were at a particular location at a particular time, you could pull out your phone and be like, "No, I took this photo." You can see me in it, or you can see I was out with my family, I took it, and here's the photo that I took, and you know, here's proof. And by the way, you know that I took it because I recall this and that, and it's something that you don't have a picture of, and only you would know by being there. These are all sorts of aspects, and it's unfortunate in some instances that we have to use this, that we have to do this. So there's a lot of positive in this, but where's the downside of it? I would say the downside would be that there's so much data and information there that if one minor aspect is something that would be triggered or changed by altering the photo, and it doesn't really change the rest of it, or you don't know if it did, or the person really knows what they're doing, it can make it more and more difficult because of the fact that there are now pieces of software that can be used to alter it. Now, what we have to remember is that people that study this, people that know deep down the forensics, the basics, the analytics of photography, videography, of all of this handwriting analytics, all of this stuff, they know what to look for and they know how to see that somebody tried to trick it. They also know to be able to say, okay, you said that was taken on an iPhone 13 Pro. Here's the lenses that are on it. Here's the possibilities. Oh, and if you cropped, here's the potential, um, you know, aspect ratios that are built in. Oh, you use freeform. Let me duplicate it. That's the things that can be done. That's stuff that people that study this every day can really know. And the advantage of technology is that you can learn this too. You can understand this too. You can follow along. You can learn from experts. You can learn from me. I enjoy this. I'm no expert, as far as that goes. I studied this stuff, but my enthusiasm in this comes from the perspective of I just wish that more people every day would understand that they're using this stuff and how it works and be more appreciative of the technology, because people are like, well, I'm just taking photos, or I'm just doing this, or I'm just doing that. But are you using those images? Are you creating those memories and then recalling them later? Are you doing searches through stuff and not really thinking about the fact that you can do that today where, even 4 or 5 years ago, yeah, you could do it, but now there's more and more information on how you can do it. I mean, the, people tagging has been around for a long time. There's cameras that you can put in a person's name, and every time you take a photo, it will tag that person. That's been around for a long time. You can set it up so you have a profiles that are specific for when you go to take a picture of a baby or, a toddler, that your camera might automatically switch into that profile. This is stuff that is amazing that exists within regular cameras, that exists within our smartphone, that exists within our life that we just take for granted and we don't really appreciate until we need it or until somebody explains it to us. And so to me, it's not just about, okay, I'm gonna nerd out, I'm gonna go in depth, but it's about appreciating the technology that I use and helping others to understand and appreciate the technology that they use and really hope that you guys all like look into it. Next time you go to take a photo, or you know what, go on your phone right now. Um, Go into photos, go into Google Photos, Apple Photos, whatever your photo, particular gallery or whatever is, and swipe up and look and see, does it have information about what device took it, when it was taken, the lens that was taken with, the resolution, what information is there? Be amazed, be fascinated by this. It's something that people years and years ago would count as a blessing to have it exist today. And we just take technology for granted and we say, well, every device can do it, or that's been around on this device since before this device. Who cares? Did you know? Like, do you think about the aspect of just how, simple it may be to you to take a photo, but what's the complication that goes into it? How difficult would that be if you had to keep track of all this information every time you took a photo and had to adjust it? And yeah, there's people that want pro modes. And you know what? I think it's great. Like, I would love to be able to have a little bit better image when it comes to what I'm doing right now. Yeah, I can do this and it's cool. And I could crop in, and I can do all this stuff and I can, share the feed of this to you guys potentially. But do we really appreciate how advanced technology has gotten and how some of the stuff that we think is so niche use, everybody uses it every day? You share a photo to somebody and go, I took this today when I was out on my walk. Quite literally, they can take that image. If they save it, sometimes it will, when you go into the maps, it can pop up and show like where it was taken. Or you can click on it and then click on the pinpoint and see and be like, I took this photo today. I found this new location. You should go visit. And they go, well, where was it? What's it called? And you have a mind blank. You can click on it, find that information to tell it, and they can too. The other thing I want to say with this is be careful when you're sending stuff to people or posting stuff. Know whether this information is being shared and posted and made public or whether it's stripped from the image. Do you really want somebody being able to find where you live if you took this in your backyard or if you're taking photos around you? Protect yourself. Look into this. Think about this. Do you know what information you're sharing with people when you post photos and you're like, "Oh, I'm posting this on Instagram?" You know, Tech for Your Needs said, explain how this is tied up with the Johnny Depp criminal trial. Just asking. It's not a criminal trial for one; it's a civil trial. I touched on it a little bit. So they had an expert witness that came in, and he was testifying on some of these images that were taken that depicted Amber Heard with a bruise on her, and he went through a number of images. His testimony seemed rather short to me. I'm gonna have to go back and, like, rewatch it again, but it just seemed rather short for the fact that how important this information could be. And I know that there was some stuff, like, he wasn't allowed to testify about the color, about, chroma, about, like, cropping and stuff. He was just allowed to talk about, okay, did he see anything that said that these images were edited or altered? And he couldn't say yes or no, and here's why. The information that he had was so varied, and without knowing how it was transmitted, he couldn't analyze it, and they wouldn't tell him, and without he even said, without the original device, it's very hard to tell, which is partially true. You're talking about images that were taken so far back. You're talking about some images that were taken like 10 years ago, images that were taken on an iPhone 4, images that were then later sent and appears to be transmitted, received with like an iPhone 6 or something. So, how does this relate to this case? Is that, well, it's great that we have all this information. It's also very limited until you have a number of people that their expertise vary across these aspects, and that we can say, okay, this person brought up the metadata and is an expert on it. Now we have somebody that's an expert on photography itself, more than just the data and the numbers behind it and comparative to. But they didn't show like what would an image look like that wasn't altered, and say, okay, make the judgment for yourself. And part of that is it might have been blocked. This is something that I'm not sure about. Maybe they decided that it was enough to have him come on and say, well, we can see that it was brought into and that it was inside Photos 1.5 and Photos 3.0, and that the OS should have it been here and said OS, 9.3.1, and it should have the, original iPhone 4 or, the name of that device that was taken, and it doesn't, and so I can say it may or may not. I can't say, yeah, he couldn't say yes or no, but that there could have been some alteration there. And this is something that's fascinating to me. Like, go try this yourself. Go take a photo and then duplicate it. Look at the information, see if the duplicate matches up with the original. Here's the other thing on that. Sometimes when you duplicate a photo, the saved duplicate will actually be lower as far as file size than the original. But what I want you to do is take a photo and I want you to copy it. So you have two identical images. I want you to go look at the information. You can download a free app on your phone and do it. Look at the metadata, look at the EXIF file, see that they're identical. Try to, see that they're identical. Then take one of them and edit it, crop it, then see how it changes it. Adjust the lighting, then see how it changes it. Do that inside like your native photo app. See how it changes it. Then take it into something like Pixelmator on an iPhone or Snapseed. You know what? Snapseed is free. Bring it inside there. See how that affects it. See what it says then inside that same tool. And you will be amazed to see what you can tell if somebody did something to change an image. This is why when I see these like photo comparisons going around on Twitter, I try to not really partake in them too much, partially because there's too many discrepancies with like misalignment of images, but also I have no way of guaranteeing unless somebody were to like send me the originals on a USB and I can pull them into a program and look to see where they edited. When I was taking my photography courses, I had an incident where I was supposed to have a RAW and all I had was the JPEG. And so because of my knowledge, and I probably shouldn't have done this, so it was a little iffy, but he told me, he's like, you need a raw image. He's like, I don't care how you get it, but whatever. And so I took and I renamed the file to um I was using a Nikon camera, so I renamed it to a .nef, which is like the raw images that was used in that aspect of it. And then I brought it into Photoshop to see, like, normally if you do that, a JPEG, when you bring it up, there's certain sliders and, like, the channels don't show. But because I had the taken the JPEG the way I did, and because of my camera and understanding, I knew that I could have it spit out what would look like a raw image. But the thing is file size. If he brought that into some sort of metadata, um, like brought that into Camera Raw, brought that into software and looked at the metadata more in depth, you would be able to see, okay, that's not actually a raw image. So you can trick it, you can spoof it, but you can't completely spoof it because there's always going to be kind of a range. So if I take a raw image with a camera, I can, if I took like 100 of them and then did an average of the file size, you would see a certain average in there. And if I did a JPEG, you would see a different, because the JPEG is more compressed, where a raw has all the information. Same thing with the problem with if you text a photo. So was it texted? Was it sent via an MMS, or was it sent via an iMessage? Was it sent via an email? How was that image transmitted? And then when it was transmitted, was it transmitted you with the option toggled on that says to like save as a smaller image to save space, or to transmit as a smaller image to save on data? This is what we don't know. And this is the problem with this. And the problem with the case, and the problem with the situation in which we don't have that information. The other thing is, will a jury question that? I think if somebody on one side or the other is smart enough to say, hey, we need to bring in somebody so that we can rebut, so we can question, and so we can say, well, you didn't prove to us that that was edited. You just proved that it was a different file size, which doesn't mean that it was necessarily edited. It could just be that it was compressed. And that doesn't change the fact that if there's a bruise on there. Could you prove that that was some sort of uh, did somebody use some sort of dodging and burning, to which is like a way of darkening and highlighting parts to change exposure within certain aspects of an image? Did somebody do that to make it look like a bruise? Did somebody do some sort of digital kind of makeup to it? This is something that could be questioned. Also, it could be asked and argued that how do we know that this is the image that we handed over that you're looking at that with? Well, because an expert witness would be very stupid and lose credibility and lose their job to lie about it, especially in some of this. Now, it doesn't mean they won't, but these are questions that came into mind, and something I wanted to talk about with this because, it's important to me as somebody who loves photography, who studied photography, who has certification in photography, who originally was getting a degree in criminal justice, who my favorite aspect of like how this comes into play is how we use it, but also how it's being used within our system to help, to hinder. But we need to question it, and I think that people need to be further educated on what it really means. Because when somebody says, well, there's a difference between EXIF and metadata, sort of. Metadata is the information that's captured. EXIF is an external image. Like, look at this. EXIF versus metadata. If I Google this, what's the difference between metadata and EXIF? Digital photography metadata is the information stored within an image describing the camera settings used, the shoot location, and more. And EXIF is the file that stores that metadata. Exchangeable image file format. That's an EXIF. It's basically something that says that holds it. So if you think about metadata as water, an EXIF is a file format like a pitcher that would hold water, or a jug or a glass or whatever. It's something that contains it. It's a file. And there's other types of files that contain metadata when it comes to video, when it comes to other files that have been used over time that's still used, that we could really get discussion going on. That's also how you can take and have an original image that's not destructed. So you can use non-destructive software. So if you bring an original raw image into something like Photoshop or Pixelmator or whatever, that is a non-destructive editor. It doesn't create a permanence on it. What you can do is edit that image, and each edit that's applied is saved in a sidecar as long as you're doing this right. There's certain things that can be done before you bring it in there, like Camera Raw. You can attach stuff to it, and then when you import it, you can only go as far back as what the image, um, the state of the image when it was brought in. So if you used a destructive editing client and then brought it in, it would have been damaged, destructed, altered, manipulated before it's brought into that program. But if you were to bring it into something like Snapseed or whatever, and how you can hit restore and it will bring it back to the original state, it's because it's creating what's called a non-destructive edit. What it does is it's attaching the edits to it. It's creating the manipulations. It's attaching that as a file. And when you restore, it's essentially wiping that. Or you hit, undo, it's moving that back. It's like going back in history. It's kind of like on a Mac, you have Time Machine. On a Windows machine, you have like restore backups. How you can go in and you can go back to a certain point. On a Mac with Time Machine, you can literally go back like sometimes seconds. You create an edit, a change. You can go back a little bit. You can go back a few minutes, few hours, few days, whatever. This is how I can look at I could potentially look at an image and be like, okay, I can tell that you altered it and I know what software you used. And I also know what changes you made. And I want, or filters. Filters are a great example because of essentially what those are is it's grabbing, okay, what changes were made in highlights, what changes were made um, in like shadows, and what changes were made as far as detail sliders, as far as all this stuff, what information was changed, where was the red channel brought up, the green channel, blue, where the channel sliders adjust, was there some sort of levels adjustment or curves adjustment, what was done to that within that filter. So you could create a custom filter essentially by adjusting things and then save that and then be able to apply that exact set of adjustments to another image and it will do the exact same thing. Now, whether that second image will look good, probably not. If the conditions in which it was captured is different than the original, then you're going to have to go in and adjust it. But when I was taking my photography classes and we would sit and let's say you're taking a group of portraits in a studio, you got your lighting all adjusted. You snap you snap like a photo of husband and wife, and then let's say you have all their kids come in and you take another photo, and then you have like dad maybe taking a photo with just his sons, and then dad taking a photo with just his daughters, dad taking a photo with both of the kids, mom with just the daughters, mom with just the son, mom with both the kids, mom on her own, dad on her own, each individual kid, but all the lighting's kind of basically the same. And you want to apply an adjustment because of your particular, I don't know, artistic aspect of it. You alter that you make those alterations, those adjustments, those edits on one image, and you save that, and then you can go and apply that to all of those images, and then you can go look back through and be like, okay, I need to make some minor adjustments because, uh, you know, I have more shadows in here because I have more groups of people, maybe, um, you know, or something got messed up with a light, something got bumped, settings I had to change because I have a bigger group of people, so I need a greater depth of field. But to get that same feeling with a single person, I dropped my depth of field, which means I open up my aperture, which means I need to bring things down. You can do this and you can appreciate it without really knowing what you're doing. So you apply a filter, and a lot of times it's adjusting, um, a softness slider or applying like a Gaussian blur. There are things that are in there. Man, oh man, I love this so much. So exciting to talk about photography, to talk about all this stuff. These things that we don't even realize that we're doing when we're doing it. But others could look and be like, "Oh, this is what you did to get that." And that's how and that's how I know that it was taken with a smartphone versus a regular camera. Or you got it really, really close because you took a photo with a regular camera and then you took one of the same thing with your smartphone, and then you adjusted things based on the lens of the original camera and the settings on there. You went into the smartphone and adjust things to line up, but it's not truly captured that way originally. And, you can't really reverse that unless somebody were to submit the original plus that attached file. But it's cool that you can do that. Or you can make these adjustments and you can send that to somebody, and somebody can apply that to all their images. Let's say you took a bunch of photos and you realized afterwards that your images were just slightly off by like a quarter stop. And it didn't destroy your images, but they're just slightly underexposed and you can save them. And you are working in a studio and you share cameras and you had all this stuff, and somebody goes, you sent them to an editor. You can say, when I got done, you know what? I realized this was off. Apply this to all my images. And you get back and you could look and see if that was done. Also, photojournalists are only allowed to do certain things. They're allowed to crop. That's about it. If you're a true photojournalist, you will crop. You do not adjust anything for artistic purpose, and the adjustments made within the camera are what you can do. You are to submit a raw image to prove that there were no alterations made other than potentially a crop. You are to submit the original plus the cropped image so that I know if you're trying to alter the story or create a new illustration or a new story by editing and by cropping somebody out, or by cropping like a building out, or I have to know that let's say I'm the editor. That would be my due diligence, my duty, and my responsibility to support ethical capturing of a story of an instance, as you are a photojournalist for me, let's say. This is where everyday life comes into play. And this is where we don't even have appreciation for what's done. We think about, like, somebody says they took a photo with, um, I don't know, a famous athlete or musician or whatever. Let's say I said, you know what? Let's say I bumped into Dr. Dre. But like, you know what? This was 5 years ago and I was, in such and such city and he was performing, and I happened to bump into him. He was out at a restaurant. And let's say it's known that he was out at the restaurant. There's a bunch of photos that paparazzi took, that maybe some people that were with him took. Maybe he took some selfies with his phone. And I say I was there too. But in none of the other images, I'm captured. But I took a photo of myself at that scene and then put him into there. I could say, well, I took a picture with him. I was there. I was there, but maybe at a different time in a different day, or before or after. And I'm able to use color matching. I'm able to use my knowledge of photography to match it. But you could say, well, this image was edited. I need to see the original. And I try to send you an image. You could be like, no, I know that you edited it together. Now, you shouldn't have to know that. You shouldn't have to, like, dig into it, but you can. And this is the amazing aspect of it. There's no such yeah, great point. There's no such thing as op-ed photojournalism. Um Not yeah, it's not really it's unfortunate, that some of this stuff doesn't really exist anymore. It's really unfortunate that we've gone away from pure pure capture, truth in technology, pure existence of this stuff, and we don't really appreciate it like we should. And we think that stuff is boring, and we think that it needs to go away. And I've had a great discussion with this, and you know, um, I really appreciate everybody for stopping on by, for coming on through, for you all, putting up with the analytics, with the shenanigans. I hope that people watch the replay and get excited about it. I hope that people think about some of the stuff that I said pertaining to, this case that's going on, and I hope that it educated some of you all about how you use it, even if you don't didn't realize. And I hope that it made you understand how it's being used, um, professionally, forensically, scientifically, but also just by lay people being used on the day to day. Thank you, Shark Fin, Tech for Your Needs, Jason C, Miles Tech, anybody who came on through. I appreciate you all for listening. I hope that if you watch the replay and you're new to the channel, you'll subscribe. If you like this, give it a big thumbs up. Also, don't forget to comment down below your thoughts, maybe some things that you have discovered by looking at images that were sent to you, or some ways that you've used the information that's captured in images to help you in the day to day. Share those experiences with me, but not just with me, but with each person that comes through and watches and is in the comment section. And I will see you all next week. Thanks for watching. Peace and love.